Talk ADHD with Alex High, and today, Dusty Chipura. Dusty and I were classmates at the ADD Coach Academy, and Dusty's gone on to do great things. I'm so excited to have her. Dusty, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dusty, what is your ADHD story?
That's a great question. So, my brother was like one of the early sort of like 80s hyper little boys on Ritalin. So, I always knew that he had ADHD. And when his son was young, his son was diagnosed with ADHD. And this was before I think like many people knew that it was like familial or heritable.
Hmm.
And at that point, I had a husband, and my husband at the time and I were speculating on whether or not we thought that my dad had ADHD because he was chronically like disorganized and very always like making you wait while he like just one more thing. I just got to do one more thing. It's like my whole childhood was like non-consensually body doubling for my dad while we tried to get out the door, and all of a sudden he had the wherewithal to do like just the one more thing that he's been trying to do. So we were speculating on that, and I turned to my husband at the time and I said, "Do you think that I have ADHD?" And he was like, "Oh yeah." And I was like, "Wait, what? Really? Are you kidding?" And he's like, "No, you definitely have ADHD." And I was like, "Oh." That was like the first time that anybody had said that to me. I think I was in my early 20s. So I did get a diagnosis in my mid 20s, I think. And it was just like, went in, filled out a questionnaire. They said, "Yeah, you have ADHD." I was given short term Dexedrine to take at work. I think primarily I had sought out the diagnosis because of feeling like distractible at work. But looking back on it, like as a youth, like it was really hard for me to keep a job. So in my teens and 20s and late 20s, it was really hard for me to like just stay at any job because I just got bored, right? Just got bored and quit. And same thing with like university. It took me like 6 years to do a 4 year university degree because I kept switching majors and dropping out. But I got straight A's like the whole way, pretty much, unless I didn't like a class, right? If I wasn't interested in the class, I got like a C. But for the most part, I got really good grades. I just like got bored. So I had a diagnosis for several years, and I think like a lot of people like didn't really know what that meant. So I sort of knew I had ADHD and I knew I had these medications that I could take, but beyond that, I didn't think that ADHD played any sort of like significant or major role in like my identity or how I functioned or how I interacted or like related to others. And it wasn't until I was in my early 30s and I had a kind of a weird like falling out with some friends of mine. And I was like so bereft. Like I was like obsessing, I was ruminating. I couldn't stop thinking about this like falling out that we'd had. And it was sort of like I had always struggled with rejection sensitivity my whole life, but it was like the worst it had ever been. And finally, I can't remember what happened, but I found an article, probably from like Attitude Magazine, talking about the connection between rejection sensitivity and ADHD. And it was like this big light bulb moment where I was like, oh my God, like this is an ADHD thing. And so I started sort of learning more about all the different like facets and aspects of ADHD and like what it actually means meaningfully to like have a diagnosis of ADHD. And then I started posting about it a lot on Facebook, just sort of like what I was learning. And a lot of people were like relating to it and saying like, "Oh my God, that's like so helpful, the things that you're posting." I started posting about it on Twitter, just talking about my own ADHD. And yeah, so then how I ended up becoming an ADHD coach is at that time I was managing a liquor store, and I had a few friends who would come in who I knew had ADHD, and we would like talk about their problems, and I would like sort of give advice based on like what I had read and my understanding of like how to manage ADHD. And again, like so I was sort of getting this feedback that the more I was talking about it, the more I was talking about it, the more I was talking about it. And I was looking for like a career change because I had been a musician for several years, and then I like burned out super hard, and my dream came to a crashing, traumatic end. And I was like, I don't ever want to play music ever again, or even look at an instrument. But I also don't want to work at a liquor store for the rest of my life. So I was like, well, what should I do? So I thought about going back to school, and I thought about like helping people, and I also wanted to have a baby. Then I got pregnant. So I was sort of like looking for this like thing in the middle of a Venn diagram that's like something I can do that I'm interested in, something that helps people, something that I can make my own hours. And I hadn't found anything. And then my nephew, who I mentioned earlier, who had been diagnosed with ADHD, he was having a really tough school year and he kept getting suspended. And there was one school year where he was suspended and he was out of school more than he was in school. Like he spent more time being suspended. And his mom was really concerned because he was, really sweet, sensitive, loving, intelligent person. And she's like, they're looking at him like he's the bad kid already. Like as soon as something goes wrong, they're looking over at him and going, "Did you do this?" Right? So I said, "Well, maybe you should get him an ADHD coach." And I, probably just heard that term like from Attitude Magazine or a website somewhere. And she was like, "Well, I don't know anything about that." So I started searching in the city that they live in, which is not the city that I live in. It's in a different province. And there were like two in the whole city, and neither of them were like really working with youth. So I was like, wow, that's crazy that there's only two. Like, I wonder how many there are in Vancouver. And so I searched, and there was like, at that time, like one. And I was like, hmm, seems like there's not very many coaches in Canada. Like, I wonder if that's something that I could do. And then we went to school together, and the rest is history.
That is awesome. Well, I just think it's amazing how you mentioned the Venn diagram thing of finding the opportunity where your interests lied and what worked for you. And so, speaking of like what's working for you, what would you say has been kind of the key to your ADHD success?
There was this YouTube video with Dr. Russell Barkley that I watched that had a really big impact on me, where he was talking about creating a prosthetic environment. He said, like, if you didn't have a leg and you needed to go, up some stairs or walk around, you'd have like a prosthetic leg. Well, people with ADHD, like the part of our brain that's supposed to like cue us, help us with working memory, it's disabled. We need our environment to function like a prosthesis. We need our environment to cue us and help us. And that made so much sense to me because my whole adult life I had been like putting notes up on the walls and like writing things down in notebooks and of course losing them. And again, like when I was married, it would drive my husband up the wall. He would be like, so my ex-husband, he'd be like, "Oh, there's notes all over the house. You don't even look at them," right? He was like kind of really quite scornful that I was always trying to set up my environment to remind me of the things that I needed to know. And he didn't like want me to have so much clutter on the walls. And I hear this from a lot of my clients, right? It's sort of one thing they have to negotiate with their partners if they're trying to engineer their environment. But for me personally, engineering my environment to like to streamline and help me with the things that I struggle with is like a huge game changer. So in my house, like there are notes all over the walls, but they don't look messy. They're very aesthetically pleasing because if they're messy and cluttered, I don't want to look at them, right? So there's whiteboards in almost every room of the house. There are pegboards in almost every room of the house that I can attach things to. Most things live on the walls. I try to utilize, one of the things I really love doing is using vertical space to store things instead of horizontal space, because we all know like horizontal space is going to become just a huge clutter pile, right? Like everything's going to pile up. But if you put it on a wall and it has a hook and it lives on the wall, you can't clutter it up. So making sure that my environment works for me has been really powerful, but also like finding ways to create like flexible routines is really important. So like it's not like, oh, this is like the one app that I use that's really good, or like, oh, I use this like planner. Like I've used all those things, but cycling between them and making sure that I have some kind of routine to reset is really important, especially like resetting my physical environment, because I struggle with mess a lot and I lose things, and that impacts my ability to like be on time or have the things that I need or show up the way I need to show up. So having like a routine to like reset my space, reset like my systems is really helpful. And I think that was really the missing piece for me, is like I had systems, but the systems would break down. And the thing I was missing was like a systems reset.
Hmm.
So the way I explain it to clients is I say, like, okay, think of it this way. You could buy the most expensive, let's say you hate vacuuming and you have really messy floors. You could buy the most expensive vacuum cleaner in the world. Like, let's say you get the top of the line, fanciest vacuum cleaner, self vacuuming, whatever. First, it's going to work great. You're not going to have to think about vacuuming floors. It's going to be great. It's going to go on for a while. But if after a time you don't like empty what's the word I'm thinking of? Like the canister, the dust thing, the
Yeah.
canister, let's call it the canister. If you don't empty that, sooner or later, the vacuum's not going to function as well. it's not going to function as efficiently. And over time, again, if you don't attend to that, if you don't, in essence, clean the cleaner, eventually, sooner or later, it's going to break. It can be I don't care if it's the most expensive vacuum in the world, eventually it's going to break, or it's just going to not function the way that it's supposed to. Because, like, yes, it is a tool that cleans, but you have to still clean it. And I think our systems are the same way. Like, our systems function to serve us, but we have to, like, do systems maintenance on the systems, right? So just to kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about, people will sometimes tell me, like, oh, alarms don't work for me. And I'm like, is it that alarms don't work for you, or is it that you've got like 20 redundant alarms that are for things that are no longer relevant, and now you've got alarm fatigue? Like, for me, alarms work, but only if I have like only one or two. And so I have to go in from time to time and like change the sounds on my alarms, or like to make sure I'm deleting out old alarms so that I don't get like notification fatigue. And if I sort of go back and like check my work on my to-do lists and clean them out and sort of update systems, maybe these post-it notes I've become sort of like, I'm not seeing them there anymore. They're in the background. So I'm going to move those post-it notes over here, or I'm going to like rewrite them somehow. I'm going to update my notifications and my reminders. Then they'll keep working for me. So doing a systems reset at sort of regular intervals as a sort of meta system has been very helpful for me. So I think the last thing that's really helped me with my ADHD is like self-advocacy and accommodation. So really just like changing the other people's expectations of me and like setting boundaries, right? So, like letting people know what I can and can't do without feeling like embarrassed or ashamed about it. Like, I had this one cousin who we were texting, and she told me over text that she was kind of upset at me because she would try to make plans, and I would not confirm, or I would never confirm the plans. And then the time of the plans would come, and she'd be like, "Are we meeting today?" Because maybe we had talked about it, but I hadn't confirmed. And that, of course, I had forgotten, and I had never confirmed it, so it didn't go on my calendar. And so, but she was thinking that because we had talked about it, that it was like a plan, and she was upset. She said, "You always do this to me. We talk about a thing, I try to get a confirmation from you. You don't answer me, and then the time comes, and you're not ready for the plans." So on the one hand, I was like, "Yes, that sounds very frustrating, and I'm sorry about that." And then I said, "But on the other hand, like, because of my ADHD, like, if you don't get a hard yes from me, if you don't get a hard confirmation, then assume it's a no. Like, that's what you need to do so that you don't get frustrated, because I have probably forgotten, and that's not intentional, but like, I also had a young child, and it was like, a time in my life where I could easily be distracted from responding to a text. So I had to just set the boundary and say, I'm not, if you don't get a hard yes from me, I've probably assumed that I've forgotten. And it's the same with showing up to places on time, right? One of the things that people love to ask me is, okay, well, how long is that going to take? Or like, what time are you going to be there? And I'll just go like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? I'm like, I don't know. I could tell you, oh, I think it's going to take an hour or half an hour, but I'm probably going to be wrong. And then you're going to be frustrated with me. So if you ask me how long something is going to take, I'm not going to allow myself to be put in a position where I try to guess. I'm just going to say I don't know, because that is frankly the truth. And I can be somewhere within a range of time. So I'll tell someone, okay, yeah, I'll be there between 7 and 8, but I'm not going to tell somebody I'll be there at 7:30, because again, there's a very high likelihood that I have no idea if I'll be there. I might be there at 6:50, but I might be there at 7:55. So I'll just give a range of times. And so changing the way that I set up other people's expectations and advocate for myself based on some of the things I know that are hard for me has also, I think, had a big impact on like not feeling really negative about myself because of ADHD.
And I think that's really key, that whole not feeling negative about yourself. And so I've really admired, when you've been speaking just now, how you set things up. So is there a way, if our viewers want to like go on and set up their environment or set up expectations, how might they go about doing that? What's going to be the shift for them that gets them to that point?
Good question. Well, so like the systems themselves are not important, because no one thing that you do is ever going to last forever. Like, things that work for you are going to come and go, whether it's like whiteboards on the walls, or using this like app to remember to check your to-dos, or you know whatever the like system itself is, there's no like one and done with ADHD. There's no like silver bullet. There's no like perfect, you're not going to find like the perfect system that once you implement it, okay, now I don't have to worry about, remembering to clean my house anymore. I've got the perfect like cleaning schedule and it's on the fridge and I can see it. No, that's going to last you maybe like a couple months and then you're going to stop using it. Like everything has like a sort of a lifespan with ADHD. So the system itself, or whatever the systems are, don't matter. What matters, I think, is like the approach to having external systems. Because, like, we don't, as you know, right? Like, we don't have any sort of good internal mechanisms for like remembering to do things, following through on, intentions. I think it can be really frustrating for people when they have goals or aspirations about like who they want to be or what they want to do, and then when the time comes to maybe like build those skills or work on that, they completely forget that, and instead they go play video games or watch Netflix, and then they go, I should have spent that 3 hours like learning to play the piano, which has been my dream for years. Whatever, right? It can be really frustrating. So we do need those external systems, but I think the big shift is the approach to those systems, which is to recognize that you're going to need multiple, like that things are going to change. You're going to need multiple systems, overlapping systems. Something's going to work for you a while, then it's going to stop working. And the thing is, if something stops working, this is it. This is the big shift. If something stops working for you, instead of being like, well, that didn't work for me, the question is, how long did that work for me? So if I sit down and I plan my meals every Sunday, and for a straight year, I'm like meal planning. And so because I do that every Sunday, I'm eating in a very organized fashion and I'm always ready to send my daughter lunch. And then one day I stop doing that for whatever reason, because that's what happens with ADHD, right? Like just the habit just like slips out of the pocket. We never really truly internalize or entrench like a habit forever, I think, for most people with ADHD. And so it's really frustrating. So if I look back at that year that I did meal planning every Sunday and I say, well, it didn't work because I stopped doing it, I'm not going to get anything out of it. But if I look at it and go, okay, well, I was able to do that for a straight year. What worked about that? Why did it work? And what's changed? Why isn't it working now? And like what would work for me now? Then I can switch. Like I'm going to need to switch. And that's the thing with anything with ADHD, anything that you're using, any system, it has a lifespan. Sooner or later, you're going to need to switch to something new. And instead of being like frustrated about that or very, downtrodden about it, I think the way to look at it is just like a place of like acceptance and coping, and like that's just the facts. It's neither good nor bad. There's nothing moral about sticking with a system forever. It doesn't make you like a better person. Nobody's going to give you an award because you used one planner all year. Like you don't get a medal for that. If you need to switch from like a planner to an app to another planner to a third planner to another app to like a calendar on the wall, and that gets you through the year, but you stay on top of your schedule because you've been planning all year even though you used 5 different things, that's the real prize. Like the real prize is staying organized. Nobody gives you a medal because you consistently used one thing. And so I think for a lot of people with ADHD, they've got this like really weird internalized shame about like switching systems, like that it's bad or something, or that it means that they're a person who's inconsistent. So I think making that mental shift that like it's okay to use as many systems or devices or tools that you need to, and just know that like whatever is working for you is probably going to stop working at some point. Then you're going to need to switch to something else. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The goal is to minimize the amount of time that you spend between systems with no systems, right? So if I'm meal planning every Sunday for a year and it works for me, and then one day I just stop wanting to do it, or maybe now my daughter has like soccer class on Sunday and that sort of ruins the whole, schedule. I can either be really frustrated that that's not working and throw my hands up and go, the other shoe has dropped. Disorganization has revisited me as it always does. Woe is me. Like I can stew in that and then just not meal plan, and our kitchen can become a disaster and our fridge can be empty and my daughter can eat, protein bars for lunch for like 3 months while I just get frustrated about it. Or as soon as that system stops working, I can be like, okay, I'm not doing it anymore, and then get curious, right? Which is, I think, a lot of what we were taught in coaching school, and a lot of what I talk with my clients about is this idea of getting curious. I can get curious about it. Why am I not doing this anymore? What's not working about it for me? What would I need to do instead? And I can switch to a new system, like figure out a new way to make sure that we stay fed. And that might take me a couple of weeks. So there might be a couple of weeks where things are disorganized, but that's different than just letting the disorganization go for like months and months because my system has crumbled and I just like feel terrible about it and I'm just stewing in it. So I think that the big shift is all systems fail. They have a lifespan. So rather than fail, think of them as having a lifespan. Get a sense of how long that lifespan is because that will tell you how often you're going to need to switch out your systems. And the goal is to minimize like what happens in between those switches and to make those switches like smoother and more efficiently so that you can always stay organized, right? And if you change up anything, again, let's use the example of cleaning your house. If you change up the system by which you remember and stay on top of cleaning your house, if you change that out once a month and you have 12 different things that you use in a year, maybe you use an app, maybe you use a little calendar, maybe you spin a wheel like on Jeopardy and like, maybe you roll a D20, whatever the way that it is that you're getting yourself to clean your house. If you have 12 systems and you switch once a month, but all year long you have a method of reminding yourself and getting yourself to follow through on cleaning the house, guess what? Like that's consistency. And so for whatever reason, I feel like we have all this guilt about changing the medium by which we're reminding ourselves to do something. And I feel like that's like the big thing that if people let go of it, they can really start to see themselves having a lot more consistency, following through on a lot more of what they intend to do, and really like being who they want to be. That was a lot. Back to you.
No, that was all very good. And I really liked, making the choice to keep things going, minimizing, because I feel like that's ADHD management in a nutshell. Like, we're always going to have our ADHD symptoms. It's minimizing the disruption that causes in our lives. So, with that being said, what do you feel is most important when it comes to ADHD management?
Self-forgiveness. There's no hack. Well, okay, two things. Self-forgiveness and like tending to your brain basics because like there's no hack, tip, trick, like thing that's working for someone else that's going to work for you if number 1, you're like mired down in like 18 pounds of like shame and guilt and embarrassment because that is like using up a ton of your like mental resources. It's kind of like running the air conditioner with like all the windows open. Like you're just wasting power. And so the more time you are spending just like ruminating on what a bad person you are or how much you suck and like carrying around a bunch of shame and guilt, you're actually losing all that energy could go into solving your problems instead if you could sort of let go of the moral aspect of it. But that's really hard for people, right? Like a lot of the things that we struggle with are stuff that like in our society we have been told is in alignment with what like people who are not very good do. Like, oh, we forgot people's birthdays and we weren't on time, we made people wait, and our houses aren't clean and we can't manage our money, and like all of these things are things that society has told us people do just because they're lazy and they don't care. So of course, people have internalized this idea that they must be lazy and they must not care and they must just be like terrible friends and irresponsible adults and whatever. It makes sense why people feel that way, but it's not useful. There's no amount of guilt. You can't guilt yourself out of having ADHD. In fact, it's actually just going to make it worse. So letting go and like finding a way to forgive yourself and recognizing like that this is like a neurobiological profile, it's not a moral failing. And I think that's where like especially online community, having community is really important. It's super important for neurodivergent people to know and to talk to other neurodivergent people because just hearing other people normalize their experience goes such a long way in helping them to like let go of all that like internalized ableism basically. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is like again, brain basics. Like it's so hard. The ADHD makes like the easy things hard, right? And if you're not eating enough food or you're not eating like nutritionally, if you're not, hydrating, if you're not getting enough sleep, which is a really hard one, if you're not sort of getting enough body movement, or your life is just nothing but drudgery. There's no time for fun or creativity in your life. Like all of these things, same thing. I always tell people like the best ADHD hacks, tips and tricks in the world are going to have a fairly minimal impact if you are underslept, underhydrated, undernourished, if you're constantly just forcing your brain to do the thing that it finds boring and hard, because that's not where we thrive, and if you're not getting any like body movement, like if you're not taking care of your body, your brain, like all of those tips and tricks are not only going to have a smaller impact, but you're going to need them more. And when you're making sure that all of those basics are addressed, which is way easier said than done. It's like super hard to to build the systems to take really good care of just those things. But if you do those, if you invest in getting really good sleep and feeding yourself well and taking good care of your body and your health and your like mental health, in terms of giving yourself some guilt-free downtime, having some room for like hobbies, allowing yourself to, have a little bit of fun and creativity in your life, all of those things are going to go a really long way to making those systems and hacks and things work better. But also, like, even just addressing those basics goes a long way towards managing ADHD. And so you won't need as many reminders. You won't be living in this like constant chronic like brain fog as much. So just the basics. The basics are really important.
Yeah, the basics. We think about that with a lot of different areas. Sports, theater, like sticking to the basics can take you a long way. So I really like that. Dusty, thank you so much for joining us today. But before I let you go, where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter. I think it's just under my name, like at Dusty Chipura. They can find me at my website, which is VancouverADHDcoaching.com. They can find me on Instagram. Instagram and TikTok are both Dusty the ADHD Coach. So just choose your platform.
All right. Once again, Dusty, thank you for joining us. And thank you for watching.